Welcome back to the Ocarina of Time Zelda Game Club, and this is part 2 of the community playthrough for Ocarina of Time, where we play through the Zelda series as a community and come back together to discuss our experience in the comments. Well, today is part 2 where we're going to tackle Dodongo's Cavern, inside Jabu's belly, and a whole lot more, including one or more very iconic scenes in Ocarina of Time. Well, if you want to get involved, it is not too late, so part 3 is going to be released next week. So play through until you reach the infamous Water Temple, and then stop. And add your comments onto this video, and they will then be read out in part 3. Now, whether it is your first playthrough or your 100th playthrough, if you play through regular style or even speedrun, I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Okay, that is it for the intro. Let's dive right back into the game. So, first of all, Goron City. So we left off at Kakariko Village and we're about to make our way up Death Mountain to meet the Gorons. We got to go and have a chat with the guard, show him the letter from Princess Zelda, and then he's going to let us through. We then have to make our way up the Death Mountain Trail, have to watch out for the rolling Goron who will try and knock you off. Keep going up and round and you'll find yourself in Goron City. Have to make our way all the way to the bottom and then play Zelda's Lullaby to get through the door. Okay, we've got our first community comment, and this one is from Dusty B, so thank you Dusty B's, really appreciate you writing in. Dusty B says, when we get to Death Mountain we discover that the Gorons are all hangry. Though the Goron at the entrance of the city tells you they eat rocks, but only have an appetite for the rocks in Dodongo's Cavern, and that is now blocked off. So is this selective starvation? The cavern was blocked because Darunia refused to give the Goron Ruby to Ganondorf. So that is an interesting point there, Dusty Bees. They only like those rocks inside Dodongo's Cavern. A little bit confusing. There are a whole load of rocks on Death Mountain, but on we go. Okay, so back to the game. You want to walk through Darunia's chamber and have a chat with him. He's not really in the mood for chatting, though. So you're going to play Saria's song near him, and then that'll cheer him up, and he'll start dancing. After a little while of talking, he's going to say he'll give you the Spiritual Stone of Fire as a reward for clearing out the monsters in Dodongo's Cavern. He also gives you a necklace to help you pick up bomb flowers, so this is going to be really useful to get into Dodongo's Cavern, because that door is blocked by a very large rock. Okay, we've got another comment from Dusty Bees, and Dusty B says the chief has taken the Spiritual Stone and locked himself until the royal family sends a messenger. With a closed gate in Kakariko and having not sent anyone, does that mean Ganondorf has an influence with the king enough to not send anyone? This part always confused me growing up. I ignored Navi, so I didn't really know I needed to go back to see Saria to cheer up Darunia. But the fun note is, as soon as you talk to Impa in Hyrule Field, you can actually get Saria's song. So that is a really good tip there, Dusty Bees. If you haven't got Saria's song, so after you speak to Impa in Hyrule Field, you want to make sure you go back and get Saria's song. Okay, so back to the game. So make your way out of Goron City and up to the top, and you're going to find a lone Goron next to a bomb flower. So pick it up and throw it over the edge to remove the boulder blocking the path to Dodongo's Cavern. Okay, so our next dungeon is Dodongo's Cavern, and this is going to introduce us to bomb flowers. We've got lava and fire puzzles. It's also a good idea to have the Hylian shield, so if you didn't get it, make your way back to the graveyard in Kakariko Village and follow the guide in part 1. We're also introduced to new enemy types called Beamos. They shoot lasers at Link, so do be real careful in there. Okay, we've got another comment from Dusty B. So Dusty B says, so as soon as the way into Dodongo's Cavern is open to us, we see a giant skull of some long-dead Dodongo. Looking even broader, you realise that the main entrance room is a spine and a ribcage. If the cavern is where the Gorons get their best rocks, is it because they enjoy fossilised Dodongo the best? This playthrough, I finally realised you can get the Scarecrow Skull Tuller on your first visit, and you can pull on one of the statues from the far end of the room, over with the Skull Tuller, flip back onto the statue and jump off to barely reach the ledge. Well, Dusty Bees, that shows a whole lot of skill there to get that Skull Tuller. And also, I really like you drawing attention to the big Dodongo in the room, so that is going to be really important later on. Okay, back to the game. So Dodongo's Cavern is more complex than our first tutorial dungeon, and that was inside the Deku Tree. This one is a lot more fleshed out, although still not as complex as later dungeons. You know, we're moving through the gears in terms of dungeon design and also complexity. Some of the highlights here include some nice fire puzzles, as well as a mini-boss fight against two lizard-like folk. I'm assuming they are Lizalfos, and as we all probably know them from our Breath of the Wild adventures. The item we have to unlock in this dungeon are the bombs, or the bomb bag. Now, at first we've got access to bombs through the gauntlet given to us by Darunia, and we can pluck bomb flowers from the ground. But roughly halfway through the dungeon we get access to the bomb bag, and that allows us to place bombs at will, meaning we can explode cracks in walls plus boulders too, allowing us access to new areas in the overworld outside of the dungeon. So once we got the bomb bag, we can open up the top floor by dropping bombs in the eyes of the large Dodongo in the main hall. So this is one of those mechanics where you have to use a newly found item to interact with the environment, and it really makes it feel like a Zelda adventure. It's a fantastic moment in the game. Really recommend getting to it. So it really makes it feel like a Zelda adventure, and it is a fantastic moment in the game. Okay, so once you've done that, it's on to the final boss, and that is the King Dodongo. So here the boss is going to suck in the air for a short time. I have to run up to him, throw a bomb in his mouth, and then get out of the way as he rolls up to try and attack. You know, simply dodging out of the way should be enough, and then repeat the bombs in the mouth trick, and he'll be dead very quickly. So pick up the heart container, and that is Dodongo's Cavern complete. Well, now we've completed the dungeon, we meet Darunia once again, and he explains that Ganondorf was the one who sealed the cave. He then gives you the Goron Ruby, and that is our next spiritual stone that we need in our fight against Ganondorf. Darunia then tells us of a great fairy on top of the mountain, so we make our way up to the top, blow up the rocks next to our owl friend. You want to enter there, and we get a sword technique called Spin Attack. So the Great Fairy also tells us of another near Hyrule Castle. So make your way back to Hyrule Castle. Near we have to sneak past the guards. So instead of going up the hill, you want to go past the guards, go to the right, blow up the boulder, and then you're going to be another Great Fairy, and you'll get Din's Fire spell. Next up, I want to do something a little bit different. This is all about the development of the Ocarina of Time. So before development began, Nintendo and the team working on the game wanted the game so it couldn't be compared to any other title. Early on, everyone involved in the game wrote down on a piece of paper what they wished to do with the 3D game, and all those slips of paper were placed on a wall. The directors of the game would look through the various pieces of paper and choose the ones that would best represent the series, and they were especially drawn to the ideas that seemed impossible, knowing that no other developer had done such a thing at that point. So one of the primary goals that the developers had was smoothly translating the sword combat from previous games into a 3D world using lock-on targeting. And IG Aonuma explained that if they had not been able to do so, the game probably would have not been a very good game at all. Due to there being absolutely no game that was similar to Ocarina of Time, the developers had to simply rely on their past video games they worked on for inspiration. Yeah, many of the people involved had created Super Mario 64 and Star Fox 64, so they had a general idea of how to create a quality 3D game. IG Aonuma stated their biggest inspiration was the company's previous video games, and having Shigeru Miyamoto on board, that also helped them achieve their goals due to his vast gaming knowledge. Miyamoto proposed the making of the game as a first-person game rather than seeing Link through a third-person perspective. So there were multiple reasons for this. For one, so the player would be able to enjoy the environments in Hyrule more than if he could through a third-person perspective. He said that when a player wished to view his surrounding in a third-person game, they always pressed the button to allow them to view it through a first-person perspective to better appreciate the world around them. Another reason he wanted to make the game first-person was so that they could focus more on the attention of creating enemies, dungeons, and all the other things like that. However, in order for the player to notice the distinct difference between child and adult Link, they had to make the game through a third-person perspective. So Miyamoto did joke and say another reason to make it third-person was because it would be a total waste not to have Link visible on screen when he is so cool looking. Okay, back to the game, and we're going to move on now to Zora's Domain. So now that Dodongo's Cavern has been complete, we want to move on to Zora's Domain, and that is on the east side of Hyrule Field. So you're going to meet the owl once again, and it'll tell you need to play Zelda's Lullaby to get back into Zora's Domain. Therefore, you want to make your way into Zora's River, and then find the gate in front of the waterfall, play Zelda's Lullaby, and that is going to part the waters. So enter Zora's Domain and have a chat with the king. Then you want to make sure you want to make your way back to Lake Hylia to find the message in a bottle. That can be found by diving down to the lake, and Navi is going to help you with the stone pillars on the edge of the water. So swim down to get the bottle and also the message, and while you're here you want to grab a fish in a bottle. You will need that in a minute. So head back to Zora's Domain and give the letter to the king. Then you want to find Zora's fountain. There's a couple of boulders here. Blow them up with a bomb to reveal the cave, and then play Zelda's Lullaby on the Triforce to meet the Great Fairy, and she will give you Farore's Wind, and that allows you to teleport within dungeons. And then to get inside the next dungeon, you're going to need that fish offering that we got earlier. Well, next up, let's go back to some developer notes. So, next of all, I want to talk about the targeting system. So the targeting system was entirely new to video games at the time, and the camera mechanics on the console were also brand new as well. So in previous games, some of the developers felt like it was challenging to go exactly where you wanted with your character, while moving in a 3D environment, especially when you plan to attack an enemy. For example, it's going to be a bit more of a challenge to stomp on a Goomba in Super Mario 64 than it would be in a 2D game like Super Mario World. With a game like Ocarina of Time, the developers had to come up with an idea to conquer this disadvantage, and thus they came up with the Z targeting system. So targeting is done by pressing the Z trigger on the back of the N64 controller, and doing so would cause Link to lock onto an opponent, a character, or an important object. So doing that is really helpful, considering that without it the player would be required to position Link so the camera is facing towards the character, enemy, or object, and they would have to constantly alter the direction and the camera is facing in. With Z targeting, the camera constantly keeps a focus on what you want to look at. This would also allow you to easily attack your target if you are battling an enemy. And the system was created by one of the game directors, Koizumi, and he is of course from Super Mario Sunshine and Super Mario Galaxy fame as well. Well, next up, let's go inside Jabu's belly. So we're inside the belly of the big fish, and here we find new enemies, new puzzles, and a new item of course, and in this case it is the boomerang. The environment plays a factor in this dungeon, given we're inside the belly of a huge marine animal, and each part of the fish acts as a different room. The mouth is the entrance, the throat is the elevator, plus we also track down the Princess of the Zora in the stomach. So she mentions the spiritual stone of water, and this is what we came for. There's a good mechanic of picking up the princess, and that makes the dungeon feel a bit unique compared to the others that we've seen so far. Okay, back to the community comments with Dusty Bees. So Dusty B says, to this day, this place really trips me out. Walking along the internal flesh of a sick whale. When we finally meet up with Ruto, she seems to have no knowledge of the existence of the letter that you found. Did she write it? Or was this more of someone's dark plan? Princess Ruto was feeding Jabu as she always does, but recently wasn't feeling well and sucked in the Zora Sapphire, and she went in after it. So I definitely like the fact that you're questioning the letter there. Did she write it, or was this more of someone's dark plan? You could imagine Ganondorf planting that letter, and that could have been part of his master plan, which we will find out later on in this video. So we finally come to the room where the stone landed, and after tossing Ruto up, she pulled up and a giant Octorok comes down to fight us. Many people struggle with this fight, but it's simple. Have your boomerang on one C slot and a Deku Stick on the other. Let the Octorok hit you. He will turn the other way as you stand, throw your boomerang immediately, it will stun him, then pull out a Deku Stick and do a jump slash. Boom, one hit kill, works every time. Well, thank you, Dusty Beast there. Really good tips. I appreciate your speculation about the letter. It does seem like that could have been part of Ganondorf's master plan. And also appreciate your tips there in terms of killing that enemy in one-shot kill. Okay, back to the game, and after solving a few puzzles and carrying the princess around, we get the boomerang. As always, this is going to be key to solving the mysteries of the dungeon. It's always useful as well outside in the overworld. So we've got a mini boss fight with the big Octo, but it's not too tricky. And the main dungeon boss is a multi-phase battle where you have to tackle the tentacles, the jellyfish, the spinning defense before finally unloading on the boss and depleting their energy. Okay, we've got another comment from Dusty Bees, and Dusty B says, Baronad always grossed me out. Supposed source of the sickness infecting Jabu. The rhythm of this fight is constantly moving and waiting for your moment to strike. First disconnecting it from Jabu and then waiting for Baronad to release the jellyfish, you can actually drop Deku Nuts to defeat them instantly. Then once you defeat the parasite, it ruptures into a nasty green carrion. Okay, back to the game. So now we've completed the latest dungeon, it's time for one of the most iconic moments in the game. So we got the 3 spiritual stones, and we've got to go back and see Princess Zelda in Hyrule Castle. But the drawbridge is up at the castle, and there's dark clouds in the skies. Nope, this does not look good at all. This is all just like the dream Link had at the start of the game. Zelda throws something as she passes, it lands in the moat surrounding the castle, and it's the Ocarina of Time. Ganondorf attacks Link with some magic and rides off, so he's already attacked the castle with his Gerudo warriors, and they've killed the king. He's now got Princess Zelda, and he wants to get into the Sacred Realm and claim the Triforce for himself. Well, after the cutscene, we dive down into the moat, grab the Ocarina of Time, and then Princess Zelda appears before you in a vision to teach you the Song of Time, and now we have to go to the Temple of Time. Okay, next comment from Dusty Bees, and Dusty says, so we get to the locked up castle gate even when during the day the drawbridge is up. The gate drops and Zelda and Impa ride hastily away. Zelda throws the Ocarina of Time into the moat, and there sits Ganondorf on his Gerudo Black Stallion. He isn't in full sprint, he isn't in a rush. With his powers he knocks us down from standing up to him and he rides off. We go and grab the Ocarina and are played the Song of Time by Zelda, and I believe this is the song the Composer Brothers died to keep a secret. So I really like this detail, the fact that the Composer Brothers died to keep this very song a secret. That is such a nice detail, really appreciate that one. Well, now we've got the 3 spiritual stones and the Ocarina of Time, we can go to the Temple of Time. So through Hyrule Town Market, and you want to make your way to the temple, and there you're going to find the legendary Master Sword. And also, we get a really iconic cutscene. So opening the Door of Time didn't ruin Ganondorf's plans as we thought it would. It was all part of his evil master plan all along. Ganondorf used Link to gain entry to the Sacred Realm. Link then wakes up in the temple, although this time things are different. We got another comment from Dusty Bees, and Dusty says, as soon as we pull the sword, we see Ganondorf laughing. He got what he wanted. The Sacred Realm is open, only one sage remains, the Triforce is before him. He gets 1/3 of it, that immense power is now his. When awake 7 years later, we meet the spiritual incarnation of Rauru, who I'm convinced is Gabora Kapora. Some Sheikah stones hint to this as well. I remember seeing this moment as a kid, I was thinking I was about to hit the end credits, honestly, not knowing the game was only just starting for me. I think this was one of those moments, Dusty Bees, I remember it when I was a kid playing through as well. You kind of think this is the end, but actually it's only the very beginning, and the moment of magic in the game, you've really got to play through it and you've really got to experience it yourself. It's absolutely fantastic. Okay, so back to the game, we meet Rauru, the Sage of Light, and he explains it was your destiny to pick up the Master Sword, but Link was too young at the time, so your spirit had been sealed away for 7 years. Ganondorf got away with the Triforce and turned Hyrule into a land of monsters and evil. Rauru then gives you the Light Medallion, and you've got a new mission. It's to save the other sages, defeat Ganondorf, save Princess Zelda, and Hyrule itself. Okay, we've got another comment from Dusty Bees. So we now go to the Temple of Time with all we need to open the door: the Kokori Emerald, the Goron's Ruby, and the Zori Sapphire, the Ocarina of Time, the Song of Time. The final key to the Sacred Realm is the Master Sword. The sword, we are told, only the hero chosen by the sword can wield. Now, if Ganondorf planned to get his hands on all the keys before this moment, why wouldn't he have planned for a hero also to arise? Well, this was an epic moment indeed, Dusty Bees. You're absolutely right there. Why wouldn't have Ganondorf planned for the hero to rise? That is a very, very good question. Okay, back to the game. Finally, you meet Sheik. She's a guide, tells you more about the sages, and you've got to go back to Kakariko Village before going to the Forest Temple. Dusty Bees is back in again, and Dusty says meeting Sheik was brilliant. Her telling you the land is different and ravaged by Ganondorf. Upon exiting the Temple of Time, it is immediately realised. The atmosphere is no longer bright and chipper, but it's dark and gloomy. Death Mountain is ringed with red, and it's ominous. Then we get into the town square, and we're faced with the living dead, and everything is destroyed. And now Ganondorf's castle looms in the background. So we're safe in Hyrule Field, but we're told to go back to Kakariko Village. We find many from Castletown took refuge here, and that Dampy has passed away in the 7 years. He wants to see if we can follow him through the catacombs. If we do, we get the hookshot. But now, off to find our best childhood friend Saria. The whole hookshot part bothered me growing up. It is so ambiguous. I'm also conflicted here. Mostly every time I play through, I collect everything before entering the Forest Temple. You can actually 100% the Fire Temple without ever touching the Forest Temple. You can enter the Water Temple and clear Gerudo Fortress before it as well. I typically do, but this time I'm going to resist for the Game Club. Well, thank you, Dusty Bees, and I appreciate you've played this game many, many times before. That's why I really appreciate your comments and the detail that you've added to the Zelda Game Club this time. Well, that was an absolutely epic moment there, but I want to go back to some developer notes from Nintendo. First of all, talk about the time travel. So IG Aonuma explained that time travel was going to be included to allow players to play as both young Link and adult Link. He said one of their goals with time travel was to have what young Link does in the past affect what happens in the future. They also wanted there to be a distinct difference between the two time periods, with Link's childhood being a peaceful place run by the Hylian royal family, and the adult Link phase being smitten by Ganondorf's malevolent rule. The team was also influenced by the dual world of The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past on the Super Nintendo. Well, next up I want to talk about the iconic Ocarina. So an Ocarina was an item that the player could use in A Link to the Past on the Super Nintendo, although it wasn't until this game that Miyamoto suggested allowing players to actually play it using the Nintendo 64 controller buttons. IG Aonuma said they were also influenced to use it because the Nintendo 64 controller looks slightly like an ocarina. You know, early on in development, the team knew that they wanted to incorporate magic of some sort. They decided to do this through the ocarina. By playing a song that Link had learned, the player can cause one of many things to happen, whether it's changing the weather, talking to people far away, or causing the sun's light to appear in a dark dungeon. According to IG Aonuma, the composer Koji Kondo had a hard time trying to think of catchy songs using a 5-note format. While using the controller as an instrument was used in many future games, IG Aonuma speculated that after Ocarina of Time, Shigeru Miyamoto wanted the idea of controlling an instrument via the controller as a full-blown game. And he did accomplish that goal with the Wii game, Wii Music. Well, that is it for part 2 of Ocarina of Time Zelda Game Club. So part 3 is going to be up next week, so play until you reach the infamous Water Temple, and then stop and add your comments on this video. Thank you so much for playing through so far. So we've completed the child section of Ocarina of Time, and now we're into the adult Link section, and also the adventure proper, and it's only going to get better from here. So, looking forward to part 3, and definitely looking forward to your contributions. Well, thanks again, and I'll see you next week.